Previously on Astro Escape.
The Orion Nebula. Hold on, let me see what the weather looks like that night. Okay, pretty clear. Ooh. Says it'll be clear there. It'll be clear there. Sounds like a good night to get the ASIAIR Plus going with the DSLR. What do you think? So I've seen the comments where it's been asked about a guide for the DSLR in the ASIAIR Plus. So in this video, we're gonna go over just that. We're gonna use my DSLR and the ASIAIR Plus and go ahead and get it set up. So this guide is gonna be very similar to the last guide where we went step by step. And there's some things I might leave out because it's just so similar, but other things I'm definitely gonna add because it's a DSLR. The first thing you definitely wanna make sure is that you have the right USB cable for your camera. And if you're a Nikon user, down in the description is a link to an image where certain models require an extra shutter release cable. Now, not all of them require it, but some of them do. So just keep that in mind if you have to use it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and get my ASI 294 off of here. We don't need it on here, we're getting rid of it. Now when you're doing image with a DSLR, you're gonna need a T-ring adapter that fits your specific DSLR. And the nice thing is that most telescopes have the same threading, so you don't need to worry too much about doing anything extra. So go ahead and get that screwed on, and then just to make things a little simpler, if you're using a telescope that has a rotator, go ahead and rotate it so the little dot that helps you get things connected is upwards. Now we'll go ahead and get the camera attached. While I'm getting this attached, I am at Mingo Observatory, so I am at the observatory that is in my Stellarium landscape guide, and it's pretty chilly tonight. It's about 20 degrees Fahrenheit right now, and it's gonna get down to close to 0. And then just go ahead and get everything else mounted, your guide camera, the ASIAIR, everything that you usually mount. I already did get this set up and leveled back when it was still light out, but because of some visitors here, I kind of got a little sidetracked on getting set up earlier. And because it is so cold, yes, I do have hand warmers to keep everything nice and toasty. Now that everything is set up, just like before in the previous guide, you want to go ahead and get everything plugged in. And for this, go ahead and do the camera. Now it doesn't matter the model of camera or whether or not it uses USB 2 or 3, you always want to plug in the main camera to a USB 3 slot on the ASIAIR. And that just helps transfer all of the data quickly. And of course, if you're using the thumb drive, plug that into the other USB 3 slot. I prefer the thumb drive. If you haven't seen it yet, I've already done a video about the internal storage on the Plus and my thoughts there. So go ahead and check it out if you haven't after you're done with this. In the last guide as well, I mentioned getting the ASIAIR connected to your mount. So a few things about this. If you're using a Skywatcher branded mount, you can use something like the EQ mod cable, which is what I'm using here. But if you're not using a Skywatcher mount, the EQ mod cable doesn't work, and you might still have to use a hand controller. The hand controller can present a few problems every now and then, so just be aware of it. Most of the time it still works. Next, I'll go ahead and get my dew straps on, so that way that's already done, and then I can kind of close up this box because the power supply I'm using throws a little bit of light, so I like to cover it up. Now, because it's so cold, I went ahead and just got the dew straps plugged in and turned on. These are USB dew straps. I haven't went with the kind that can be controlled by the air yet, but these work just fine. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and plug the power on. We're just gonna go ahead and get it turned on. The last thing specific to a DSLR when it comes to getting it at least all plugged in and turned on is definitely use an AC adapter if you have a constant source of power. Constantly changing out batteries gets kind of annoying really quick, so If you can find a constant AC power, thanks, then you definitely put yourself in an advantage, because then you won't have to go out every couple hours and change it. This one that I have for the Canon T7i is linked in the description if you do want to check it out. If you use one that uses an LP17 battery. And because it is frozen, it's likened to tie itself up into knots. The last thing to do real quick is go ahead and turn your camera on without having the USB cord plugged into the camera itself, and just make sure that it is in manual mode, and then put it roughly at the ISO that you want to start it at. I'm starting at 800 ISO, and we'll see how that looks, but also make sure it's in bulb mode. And then the other thing that you want to make sure of is that the camera is in RAW only. As long as you're in RAW only, you're good, which this is. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the screen and then plug the USB cable back in. All right, from here, all we have to do is grab the tablet, and because it's dark enough, we can go ahead and get the polar aligning. Okay, now that we are in the app and up and running, I've went ahead and shut off all the lights, so I'm going to show you everything in the app from now on. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and select the mount, which, because like I said, I am using the EQ mod cable, go ahead and scroll to EQ mod mount. So make sure you select your specific mount. Now, because my ASIAIR pretty much uses this scope all the time, for the Zenastar Z61, it's set to 368 millimeters, and the guide scope is already set to 120. For the main camera, it notices my Canon DSLR, so we'll go ahead and select that. And then for the guide cam, it's already set to the mini. Then we can go ahead and hit enter. Okay, now that we are in the app, the camera is right, the guide camera is right, mount's right. So what we want to do is go ahead and polar align. The way you do that is in the right hand side there, you go ahead and tap on whichever word is there, preview, focus, PA, doesn't matter. And then another menu will pop up and you go ahead and hit PA. Now, I haven't really done any pre-polar aligning here, but the last time I set this mount up was here, so I should already be fairly close. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run it.
So jumping in here during editing, that was actually a bad idea. In my previous guide, I did recommend doing a polar line using the polar scope and then doing this ASIAIR's polar alignment. That works out so much better. And I eventually ended up having to do that because it was just way off. But we're gonna go ahead and take a look at Sirius to get focused. So we'll go ahead and search for that, and we'll get it slowing.
Okay, so the polar alignment gave me a little bit of trouble, but got that out of the way, and it wasn't slewing correctly. So one thing to note about when it's not slewing correctly is if it gives you problems, turn everything off, set the mount back to the home position manually, and then turn it all back on. After that, it slewed right to Sirius. And now that we are using a DSLR, what we want to do is go into focus mode. And I haven't used this since the update, and it gives you all that annoying stuff. So we'll go ahead, hit that. I'm going to put the bat knob mask on. And we'll just tell it to shoot. Okay, so we're already pretty close. So go ahead, unlock the lock on the focus. I'm just gonna scoot it back just a little bit. The thing about the auto shots too is you gotta wait for it to settle just a little bit. Once it updates, we'll be good. Looking at this the way it is, it looks really good. Now, I'm gonna tempt fate a little bit with all the troubles I've been having with this video. And I'm gonna unplug the camera from the ASIAIR real quick and use the live view just to make sure that the focus is actually good. It is good. Now, go ahead and plug this back in. Now that we're good and focused, we can go ahead and tell it to go to the Orion Nebula. Now already with the way that the camera is oriented on the whole thing, I might not need to change the orientation very much, which is a good thing. Okay, look at that. We are already on Orion. One thing I want to do, I want to rotate just a little bit. And then while we do that, go ahead and get guiding doing its thing. Not quite enough on the rotation that I wanted. So we'll rotate it just a little more. And the other thing I want to do, bring it to the left just a bit. Now while it does this, it is calibrating, so the picture is going to be a little bit blurry, but that's fine. Okay, so I have the framing I want. We'll tell it to go back. Apparently doing that told it to meridian flip, but that's okay. We're going to let it calibrate, and then we'll come back in a second and have it flip. All right, so finally got it on the Orion Nebula, and now we're back inside where at least it's a little bit warmer, because it's like 17 degrees outside and it's like 65 in here. So yeah, if we look back into the app, we can see that we are on the Orion Nebula. Now the next thing you want to do is tap on the preview button, go ahead and click on AUTORUN, and reset any progress from any previous session, and then go ahead and click the plus. So because Orion is such a bright target, so what we're gonna do is 5 second frames, and we're gonna shoot for around 5 minutes total. And that is roughly around 40 frames. And what this is gonna do is this is going to preserve the trapezium when we go to stack it in the next video. We'll go ahead and hit the plus again, and this time we're going for 15 seconds, so you can't use the drop down for this. You have to hit the little box and type it in. And we're actually gonna double the amount of time. So for 15 seconds, we're gonna go up to 10 minutes. Because it's still very bright what we're gonna be getting, we don't need a whole lot of time. So again, we'll play around until we get to about 10 minutes of time, and 60 frames is way too many, so we'll take it down to 30. Whoops, yeah. Still a little bit too many. Let's go down to 20. 11 minutes is fine. We'll go over there. So 20 frames at 15 seconds. Now we'll go to 30 seconds. And we're gonna do 20 minutes here. And if you're having a problem figuring this one out in your head, on my website, I do have an exposure time calculator. That way, if you're sitting there doing this in your head and you're like, well, what is 40 frames getting to about 15 minutes? You know, what exposure time do I need for that? You can figure it out on the website. But we're doing the 5 second frames at 5 minutes, the 15 seconds at 10 minutes, 30 seconds at around 20 minutes. And okay, so for the 15 seconds, we're gonna need to do 40 frames to be 10 minutes total of that. And then for 30 seconds, to go up to 20 minutes, all we're gonna do is keep the same number of frames. Now we'll go ahead and add in minute-long frames. So for the minute-long frames, those will be about an hour at 40 frames. Or about 40 minutes with 40 frames at 60 seconds. Wow, my math is terrible. All right, lastly, just so we get the real dim stuff, we're gonna do 2-minute frames and do 40 frames of those. And that'll be about 80 minutes total. And the whole thing is gonna take about 2 hours and 43 minutes. So now that that's done, just go ahead and hit run. And after we're done, because it's a DSLR, we're still gonna have to take some calibration frames. and we will come back and do the calibration frames after this is done running. All right, so the time is 1:23 a.m. and Orion is already down below 20 degrees, close to the horizon. So I've called it here. Not gonna get any of the 2-minute frames, but got 30 of the 1-minute frames. So we're just gonna run with that. Now, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and cancel what's going on, go out and put the cap on, and we're gonna go ahead and go through doing darks. So let's do that. All right, so before I run out and throw the cap on, I want to go ahead and just tell the mount to go to home position because we don't need it to be anywhere else. So go ahead and do that and then run out and put the cap on. So when you do your calibration frames, you want to go back into AUTORUN and just go ahead and reset the progress. We don't need what we had anymore. And we fight with connection errors apparently. Okay, so we can go ahead and cancel out the 120 seconds because we don't need those. And go ahead and for each frame, change the type to dark and just set the amount of frames down to 10. And then we'll call that good. And then at the end of it, go ahead and hit the plus again, then do bias. And we can just select 20, we don't need that many. And call that good. Now after all the darks are done, we'll go ahead and put the light panel on and do the flats afterwards. But we have the darks for each exposure that we actually did, and then the bias for all of it. And we'll just let that run, and it'll take about 20 minutes. So we'll go out and just hit go. And then we'll just let it run. All right, so the darks and the biases are just about to finish. Got about another minute or two left and those are done. And we'll get out there and get the flats done. But before we do, I do have a question for you. If you're using a DSLR with the ASIAIR Plus, what are you using? Let me know down in the comments below. And while we wait for this to finish, one of the things that interrupted was there was a band of clouds that really clouded things out for about an hour, and that set things back. That's why we couldn't do the 2-minute frames. But hey, that thing happens all the time. Don't get frustrated if there's any kind of interruptions or things aren't going the right way. You're always gonna have great nights, and you're always gonna have some nights where the mount doesn't want to fully pull or align, or some clouds roll through. Just general frustrations like that. And the biases are almost done. It's time to get everything back on. It is around 5 degrees Fahrenheit now, so it's pretty freaking cold out there, but we'll go ahead and get it done. I am the only one here at the observatory, so I can turn the light back on. And the first thing you want to do when you're taking your flats is get the mount flattened a little bit. So you can unlock both locks and just lay it flat. And I'm actually going to go the other way just to make sure that I don't bump it. And then grab a t-shirt. Any t-shirt will work just as long as it's not dusty or dirty. And place it over the edge of the scope, and even with it being so cold right now, you might need to take the gloves off to make this work. And if you have to grab onto anything with it being cold, grab onto the dew heater. But as long as the t-shirt is stretched nice and flat, you're good. Now when you're taking your flats, it's pretty simple. Just gotta plug in your panel and then make it as dim as possible. Doesn't need to be very bright at all. And just gently set it on top there. Now for this next part, we'll go ahead and turn off the light. and go back into the app. So in the app, we'll go ahead and cancel out the auto run. So we'll reset the progress, and then we're going to close everything. And then we'll go ahead and start again. We'll hit flat, and then we'll change it to about 20 exposures. Go ahead and hit OK, and we can just run. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but I am using the L Pro filter for this shot. So the light pollution at the observatory still does kind of suck, but it's way better than my backyard. And the L Pro filter is enough for the light pollution, but it still lets through a lot of broadband data, which is perfect for how bright this object is. And we are done with the flats. So what we'll do is go ahead in here, and I want to reset the progress. Actually, reset the progress, and then just change these to darks. And then we're just gonna hit OK real quick, and it doesn't automatically switch it over to flats. I've seen things saying that it does do that, but it doesn't. Our flats were a little bit too short, and there really isn't much we can do about that with the DSLR at this point. Some things you can do with the DSLR to get your flats a little bit better is take it off of the mount and then move it inside and put your light source just a little bit further away, not right on top of it like it is here. And that'll get your flats to about 3 seconds. Now, I did notice that the 1.3 seconds that this exposed for is enough that it did reveal some dust, and that's what we're looking for. The dust and the vignetting in the flat is perfect. So we're gonna run with that. So back into the app real quick. Let's go back to where we were setting it up at the dark and just change the exposure time to 1.3 seconds. And we're just gonna set this to 10. We don't need 20. Do 10 darks for everything, hit OK. And then we're gonna go ahead and put the cap back on. But now that that's good to go, we'll go ahead and turn the light back off and then run these 10 dark frames. Now these dark frames are for your flat frames. So you definitely, every time you take flats, take a set of darks at the same exposure. That helps calibrate the flats for the rest of the image. But we'll go ahead and turn off the light and run this.
Alright, and at this point you've already seen the little pop-up about microphone problems. Now, my tablet was the only thing recording audio, and at this point it was at my feet and was picking up the sound of crunching snow more than my voice. So I'm just going to walk you through what I'm saying here on screen. This picture was an HDR bracketed style photo of the Orion Nebula. Unfortunately, because of those clouds, I couldn't get all of the data I wanted, but hey, we're gonna run with it. And in the next video, we're gonna go over processing all of that data in PixInsight. If you're a little bit more curious about using the ASIAIR Plus, I do have another guide that's a little bit more in-depth. I did skip over a few things in this one. You can check that out. It'll be popping up on screen here in a second. But hey, that's it for this video. If you found this video helpful, please do like, comment, and then maybe consider subscribing. I want to thank you for watching. Clear skies.